Okay, there's a few more people logging in, but I think we will go ahead and get started here. So thank you everyone for joining us for this expert webinar series. Most importantly, thank you to Ben Broadband for being the sponsor of this series, a very timely sponsorship as we all spend time together on Zoom and the internet and whatnot. There will be a follow-up email that we'll send with a link to enter to win a drawing for a $100 gift card to Tumalo Creek Kayak and Canoe. They didn't make that part easy on me. So keep an eye out on your email inboxes after this for a link to enter to win that $100 gift card. Again, thanks for joining us. We are excited to learn about innovative thinking today with Cindy Levine. Please feel free to add comments in the comment box throughout this, or there's a Q&A box. You can throw some questions in there. The whole thing can be a little informal, so if I see, we'll kind of keep an eye on the chat box. If we see any pertinent questions or anything come up that we want to jump in and get answered right away, we will do that. Otherwise, we can definitely do some Q&A at the end, and we will send the we'll send the slides of hers in a follow-up email as well. So again, keep an eye out for that. So now I have the honor of a quick introduction for Cindy. She's the founder of the Cindy Levine Group. Her company provides value-based leadership coaching and advisory services, to change-making organizations in the social impact, nonprofit, and corporate sectors. Her mission is to foster bold thinking and action in the leaders and teams she supports so that together we can muster the grit to move us all, teams, organizations, communities, and the planet towards a better future. Some of her high-profile clients include Burberry, BuzzFeed, my personal favorite, ESPN, the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, and Planned Parenthood. Especially since moving to Central Oregon, Cindy enjoys working with early and mid-stage social enterprises where she can offer leadership coaching combined with her business and operating experience developed in the 20-plus year career as a JP Morgan investment banker and COO, Chief Operating Officer. She is on the advisory board currently for Leadership Bend and has run a leadership book club program at the Haven down the street from me. She is also on the board of directors of Vision Spring, which is an award-winning social enterprise providing access of affordable eyeglasses to the working poor globally so they can see to earn and see to learn, which I actually Googled it earlier. I had never heard of that. So always learning. So thanks for being here today, Cindy, and take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be with you today. I love the fact that we're talking about something that is pretty paradoxical at this point in time. Innovation and innovative thinking is about disrupting the status quo. And we're in a bit of a paradox because there has been so much unexpected disruption to the status quo in the last couple of months that some of us are too frozen to engage in innovative thinking. So I'm finding this an interesting topic at an interesting time. My hope is that today you'll I'll just give you some food for thought about how to continue making the pivot from what's felt in many ways like survival mode to a lot of us the last few months, and start to imagine what it could be like to re-engage in thinking that has a perspective and a forward look to it, notwithstanding the uncertainty. I was thinking about the Bend YP audience and do like in my work to think, what are the applications? How is this practical for folks? And there are a couple of ways where I think this can be helpful. What we will go over today. One is the obvious place of back in your workplace, whether you're in a nonprofit, early stage enterprise, another type of company, to bring some of these thinking tools back in and reactivate them with your teams, I think can be helpful at this point in time. There's also been a lot of disruption around careers, where people are thinking very differently about career trajectories. So I think there are a lot of, hopefully there will be some interesting perspectives, tools, ways to expand thinking on what is my career, what could it be, since the rules of engagement just got changed for many of us. And the last thing is, as I've been in Ben for 4 years, I appreciate that there are a lot of existing, but also a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and early stage thinkers. So if you've got a big, hairy, audacious idea hanging out, collecting dust in your closet, this could be a time to pull in some of these innovative thinking tools, dust that off, and see how it might fit into the world right now. I'd love to, just as a coach and facilitator, get your voices in the room, so to speak, with me for a moment. So we're going to do a really simple answer yes or no to 2 questions for me, if you wouldn't mind, in chat, just to get a sense of where everyone is in this pivot from what the heck just happened in the world to can I step back and engage, and frankly, some people feel indulge in thinking innovatively. So first question, in the context of your work environment, so at work with your team around professional objectives, how many of you since March of this year, March 2020, have engaged in thinking out beyond 3 years? It'll be yes or no. At work, have you thought about things out past 3 years since March? Appreciate you responding. All right, some of both. Thank you. And now, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, kind of. I get it. I totally get it. That's where I've been too. Okay. Now, question sort of part 2 is with respect to your personal life, which with friends, family, yourself, your career. Same question. And since March, how much thinking have you done about you and your future past 3 years out? A lot. So it's yes, I have thought about it, or no, I haven't. So I'm picking up the vibe, more yeses, but I'm not, yeah, again, since we're not doing this survey style, I'm not exactly sure. Good. All right. So I feel it's interesting. I'll say this now instead of later. Thank you so much for your input. As I'm talking with clients right now, I think we've been in this place where a lot of attention has been going to the quality of well-being of our employees and our teams and ourselves. And so I tend to come back into a client situation and say, so how are you doing? I mean, really, how are you doing? And that's some of the advice other experts have given, which I think is so valuable. And I'm starting to get more of, like, I'm fine. It's like, there's just always going to be a lot to process right now. I just want to do stuff. I just want to get started. So I'm bringing a little bit of an attitude today about all of this well-being matters, and thinking feels good too. So that's a little bit the tact here. All right, I have 3 disclaimers, and then we'll get to some slides and some actual learning. First is, I am an optimist. I am an optimist by wiring, but especially these days by choice. And I do think good leaders do have an ability to bring an optimistic mindset to the world, because it's really the only way you can stay open to possibilities about how things may unfold and have really the muster and the grit to try to lean in and be part of that solution. So there is absolutely an optimistic bias in what I'm going to be speaking about today, because frankly, that to want to think prospectively about what might be requires that, that core. So optimism is an embedded bias here. The other thing that I hate jargon. And there is a lot in the world, and there's certainly a lot in coaching and leadership coaching. So whenever a word becomes so pop culturized or has such become so genericized that I go, I don't even know what this word means anymore. I feel the need to break it down and reflect on it and study it and come up and infuse it with my own meaning that I can therefore hopefully share in conversation with others. And no surprise, innovation has become one of those words for me. So you are my test audience today for a definition of innovation that I will share with you, and I'm inviting you now to give me feedback, if not during this artificial webinar, subsequently. But it's a word that's hurled around a lot, and let's see if we can give it a specific meaning that allows you guys to take some action from it. The third disclaimer is that I love ideas. I am a person, I got a little left brain in me, I got a lot of right brain in me, and ideas really energize me. If you gave me a whiteboard for Christmas, I would be really, really, really happy. And I know we've got all sorts of people with all sorts of thinking styles on this call and in the world. So I want to upfront say, you now know that this is like my gig. I love this. And I also want to say, and will throughout the presentation, that there is room for left brainers and right brainers in innovative thinking. And partly it's a question of what muscles we flex, and partly there is room for both types of thinking. So planners and executors have a role in this, as well as pie in the skyers. Okay, and we'll get into that a bit more. Last thing is that I'm not going to differentiate today between virtual and in-person ability to convene thinking groups for a number of reasons. One, I think everything I've stepped back, everything we're going to talk about today, I believe can happen virtually. And in fact, sometimes, even though we're all zoomed out, sometimes a thinking style session done remotely forces the slower pace, which can be very helpful to those kinds of conversations and for the emergence of new thinking. So it absolutely works that way, and it works in person. And most of us are, I think, betwixt and between a bit in what our forums look like these days. Okay, so big preface, I am going to share my screen and we are going to get started. All right. So quickly, we are going to spend a minute now, as we already have, just to reiterate why now, why bring innovation and innovative thinking sort of back into the dialogue now. I'm going to offer you my innovation definition, which is informed by other great thought leaders. I want to spend a few minutes on the section called like getting started, which are some of the conditions which we can go ahead and wrap our arms around, like today, tomorrow, to start clearing off the cobwebs of thinking prospectively in a really open, associative way, and that can help get the creative juices revving and primed against the backdrop of all the stress that is in the air, which is hard to work through and get to a creative thinking place. And then the main event is to share some innovative practices with you, which I hope, in the spirit of everything to do with leadership coaching, it's all simple, not easy. And so hopefully these are some simple practices that you might be able to riff on and or bring back to your groups, professional or not, and spend some time with. This, I'm sure many of you have seen, and I only want to pause on it's really an interesting time that what we are too busy doing these days to not be able to understand that a round wheel might be better than a square wheel is really new and novel. And so we have to be kind to ourselves around that. The cliche of we're too busy with status quo, with keeping our heads down and doing the day-to-day business as usual, all of that jargon has actually been replaced by we're too busy surviving. We're too busy worrying about economic recovery and the impact of it on us and on our businesses and our nonprofits. We're too busy feeling stress. We're too busy feeling pain, at the social dynamics in our country right now and our role in it. So I do want to pause and say, what is going on that we have to work through to be able to get to an invigorated thinking space is not small change. And so we have to hold on to that and still try to move forward in our thinking. Here are a couple of reasons why I think it is the right time. Herbert Joly recently in Harvard Business Review, he was always, as I understand it, a well-respected leader at Best Buy. and he found in his career moments that ended up mattering to his team, to his employees. And this quote strikes me as at the heart of why now. Re-engaging around the future can be a moment that matters for employees. Here's how I see on the mobilization side, to my earlier point, for a lot of people, you know, especially in that are on this call, or left brain or right brain, thinking feels good, and thinking in groups often feels good. So it's got a morale purpose to it, right? Your dopamine gets dialed up. It feels good. We know, and I just want to reinforce this to you, that the fundamental intrinsic motivators for people with whom we work are to feel contribution, to feel participation, and to feel recognized. And there is nothing like saying, will you be part of a group that is helping us think out of the box about the future to help a team feel, you know, work towards feeling that their intrinsic motivators are met. When we wake up from this, whatever that looks like one day, everything that many of you in your organizations may have been doing, but many were not, around what does it look to lead, team, collaborate in the world is going to look and feel different than the old status quo. So anything we do now is actually developing and flexing muscles for our teams around collaborative solutioning skills, which is really important. Equally on the business side, yes, bringing focus back to our business understanding and our sense of purpose feels good as part of the pivot from, you know, the survival mode of the last month or two. It does prime the shift towards same point to future state thinking. And if, as you're thinking about, you know, where and what could be different against all of the uncertainty and the white space out there, you may end up with an early adopter advantage, knowingly or by dumb luck. Either way, it counts. And I love this thought that, you know, when we have an organization and we want to change something, it is part of the equation that there is resistance. There are people who are status quo defenders. The unique nature of how our world has been disrupted means that everyone's been disrupted. Doesn't mean there aren't still hangers on to the old way, but effectively the disruption has been done for us. Sorry, guys. What'll be hard, we've already talked about. You know, there is no manual for this. This is making it up as we go. I think the only point I haven't touched on here is well, I have touched on all these. The harder, you know, the planners, the executors in us may have a harder time seeing the white space, but I'm going to make a point in a minute about when we get to the definition, about how there is a role for everyone around a table at a time like this. So here's where I'm going to welcome your feedback. For a long time, I'm going to start with the bottom of this page. Innovation as innovative thinking, the process by which one thinks differently than they do in the course of day to day, is not about the outcome of a single big bang brilliant idea, you know, that may make you millions of dollars or may change the world or, you know, may solve the global water problem. It is a process of creatively solving problems, but challenging ones. So I think at the heart of this innovative thinking is creative problem solving. At its heart, it's making connections across what seemingly is disconnected. Different fields, different problems, different ideas. And the cognitive skill, and we're going to touch a little bit more on this in a minute, is really associating. It is associational thinking. If anyone has had other types of you know, health experiences in their life, I'm a product of some therapy. It's very free associative. It's the process of making sense of things that the magic is in the trying to make sense of things that otherwise didn't seem connected and synthesizing them so that novel connections arise. And novel and new doesn't mean it can't also be incremental. Here's for my left brainers in the crowd. Again, it's not necessarily a big bang. You know, how many examples over your careers have you heard of a business that adapted a new manufacturing process that changed the nature of their value proposition, and was the key to scaling? So it can be the idea for a new enterprise, but it can also be an innovation around a process or a product. So there's plenty of room for everyone's kinds of thinking. The heart of it, though, is being able to think about connections in new, novel ways that otherwise were not there, and see what magic arises from that. And it goes without saying, I think, but it is best done inclusively, collaboratively, and diversely. At the heart of this is that the more diverse points of view, knowledge sets, experiences, and expertises you have, the better it is. So there's really nothing about innovative thinking which isn't hugely helpful to the agenda we're all struggling with right now around racism and anti-racism. So yes, I chose this picture because I'm a child of the 60s. Hopefully you guys haven't started drinking yet today. This is just to reinforce that the essence of this thing is a process, a way of thinking together called associating. Setting the conditions are two-part of grasping different things and bringing them together. Connecting the unconnected is another way of saying it. And then making sense in new ways. It's the new way into synthesizing these connections. The conditions for setting this up are two. Again, the variety and the composition of the different expertises you have around your metaphoric table, and the safety. We talk a lot these days about psychological safety, but the safety and the tone with which you're inviting people to bring their creative selves, their best creative selves, to the equation. You see, you're learning a lot about me through this presentation. I'm a child of the 60s and I'm really ready to be a grandmother. But that hasn't happened yet, alas. Here is the part where no matter what one's tendencies are around naturally being, a pie in the sky, whiteboard thinker, or not, that there are, and the work here is from the innovator's DNA. I'm going to share another source at the end, but you'll see a reference here at the bottom of this page and next, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the idea, as everything is, that all skills can be developed with practice of behaviors that are reinforcing of it. And so the ability to be an associational thinker and maximize your cognitive ability around innovative thinking is really supported by at least, and probably more, but these 4 types of behavioral activities and practices. Questioning, with a really high question to answer ratio, and especially where questions are valued as highly as good answers. Good questions are valued as highly as good questions. This, by the way, in my opinion, is a lovely thing to bring, into a thinking session, to not become a slave to it, but to set an objective of more questions than answer in the first half day or however long you may be doing it, and get everything out on the table. It's also a great, I think, manager and leadership tool to reinforce that when someone does ask a good question in the normal course of the day, that it is worth reinforcing. That's a really good question. It's helping us think differently. The second behavioral skill that helps you discover enough to then bring a lot back to your thinking session is observing. And this goes without saying, but if you pause here for a minute and just sort of scan, maybe in your work setting, the stakeholders in your professional life. How current are you on really having had a pulse check with them, having carefully watched what this has been like for them? That might give you new insights if you looked a little more closely or had a conversation with them. I've got 2 clients right now who are realizing that they don't really know what their in their case, they call them clients, what their clients are struggling with. They're providing their current service to these clients, my clients, but they really haven't called and said, how's this whole thing going for you? When you look forward, what are you imagining are your new pain points? What's going to be easier and harder for you as you look into this uncertain future? So I just wanted to make that call out for if there's, something on this list, customer, product, service, and, whatever private or public sector you're in, is there someone in your stakeholder group that you might learn something new from that would in turn help you think differently about what you are doing as their service or product provider? The last two discovery behaviors that I want to touch on are idea networking. Again, if you're an idea person, this does nothing except sort of make you smile ear to ear. I mean, very different than social networking, which God knows is all over the map these days, to a fault for all of us, and resource networking, i.e. filling a job or looking for a job, all of that sort of thing what would it be like to decide one or two random ideas that you think may be related to, that you think somehow may be connected to what you are considering for the future, and network to share ideas with folks, or find new thought leaders to follow. There's a lot here, and we're going to come back to it in the actual practices. But I just want to really plant the seed that idea networking can be really fun. And it's even for introverts, because it's like who does not want to go talk about their idea? And if you're really going curious to find out and to explore and to discover, it can be a super cool conversation. And lastly, experimenting. Trying out new stuff, piloting new stuff. I realized that, to me, of the four, this is probably the hardest in the current state. But it's an important part of the portfolio of discovery behaviors, so I wanted to include it here. And certainly the try, test, fail, learn cycle is something that is a way of life now. I think it needs to be more of a way of life for us in our professional settings. So this is another good example to practice to then flex it. Okay, let's pause here, and I will ask Sean, Maddie, anyone who's been able to be following chat, if there are any questions or comments that we should bring in now. And I'd also invite, if something is coming to mind for you, this will be a good time for me to share the mic, so to speak.
Nothing yet, but we can see if anyone's typing real quick.
Okay. All right. Nothing right now, Sean?
Nope.
Okie doke. So the next couple of thoughts here are around, clearing your mind, clearing your mindset. Here is where I think part of the shift is for us. We've been in this, what just happened to us place? And I'm suggesting, as many of you are, that we continue to go shift to the what if, what could be better, what about. I alluded to the second point earlier, but I do want to make it again. Instead of saying the world just turned upside down. Disruption has been done to us, which it has. It's also been done for us. So while there is a lot of white space with question marks in it, there's a lot of white space. And for innovative thinking, that's a gift. So thinking about disruption has been done for us. What bridges do we want to build to fill it in new ways is a suggestion I have for how you shift mindset. To get in the zone of innovative thinking requires untethering from today, putting a timeline aside, and really practicing the art of a possibility. Again, not easy these days, but can be done, certainly for a bit of time when you're all together with exploring big, hairy ideas. To think of innovative thinking opportunities as learning and iterative opportunities, not an expectation to do something and conclude something. I mean, starting it for yourselves and or for your teams as a process, but starting it now is something that I think is really valuable. And it's really important that it not morph back into, so what do we conclude? What are the next steps? It is, in fact, to the last point about an emerging new vision, more so than being exact. Like I read something recently which I liked. It's way more like an impressionist painting than it is like a photograph.
Hey, Cindy.
Yeah.
Penny asked, can you please elaborate on no timeline?
Yes, thank you, Penny. So to open, if I ask a question like, where do you think we should be in 3 years? Or let's update our strategic plan from a 3-year plan to a 5-year plan and put a timeline on it like that. In my experience, that closes thinking and invites people to benchmark from today and to iterate and extrapolate towards the future. One. So it actually closes the open-ended nature of what we're saying here is really making new random connections that may actually open up a whole new novel approach. So the no timeline in this sense is that not to create closed thinking, and two, at this particular point in time, our whole assumption of I can even plan 5 years out, I think is shattered. At least mine is. And that doesn't mean we don't still envision for the future and try new things, which is innovation, but to say 5 years from now, what do we think the world will be like? I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know who does. So that is another way which indirectly and ironically, innovative thinking can get closed down. I don't know, Penny, does that thumbs up or something if that is helpful by way of explanation? It closes thinking versus opening thinking in the sense that you would want an innovative thinking session to be. Thank you. Okay, trick, on this page, neat, simple, not too many words. This is a hard page. What do you know to be true that you can count on as you walk into a room together to think in new, expansive ways? First of all, not more than you know to be true. And there may be less than what is even on this page. Here's what I mean by that. In the research on innovative thinking, and in my experience, certainly over the years, the 3 things that you can get closer to being clear on than lots of others are, why are we here? What is our purpose? That may look like a mission statement, or it may not, but for purposes of today and our 1 hour time, happy to pursue this, have follow-up conversations with anyone on this. But if you walk into a room saying, let's assume, there's a hypothesis, our purpose doesn't change, that what we are here to do sticks. What can you do a reassessment, a current assessment of what are we really good at? What are our core competencies? And who is our customer? And that can be tricky. Those are things I would invite you might bring into our metaphoric, innovative thinking room. I'm going to give you an example here just to breathe a little life into this. Sean mentioned that I'm on the board of Vision Spring, which is a social enterprise whose mission is to bring affordable eye care to the poorest of the poor globally so they can see to earn and see to work. And it really is about creating supply and demand. And I could go on a riff there, but I will not because I'm very passionate about the work they do. So we have 200 people working in India, many of before COVID, whose jobs cut across the board, but who were primary breadwinners at above sustenance level, but not much more for their families, not just for them. And then COVID hit. We were doing things like camps and CSR projects into companies where we would screen and test and provide for sale glasses. We worked in partnership with local hospitals. Our primary goal was, given that there's no market, nor we can get around to put eyeglasses on faces right now, was to keep our folks employed if we can. And so far we have. So we know that our purpose is to improve livelihoods, to make the quality of life better for those people we serve so that, in this case, they can see better. Here was the shift for us when we said, what do we do during this period? So what are our core competencies? Well, we know how to do vision camps. We know how to, on a dime, prescribe and or decide if someone needs reading glasses. We can get really cheap distribution of glasses to folks. And someone in our group meeting, in an innovative thinking meeting, said, well, are we glasses providers? Or are we quality of life providers? And that led us to think about and say, in fact, what we do best is get quality of life stuff through the last mile of the pipeline to the base of the pyramid. And we'd never thought that way before. We'd never thought, there are other things we could put through our pipeline because our whole origin was from a brilliant optometrist, an ophthalmologist. And that then led to, so why can't we put PPE and other things through our pipeline right now, which is what we're currently doing. And I know others are too, but I wanted to, the illustration was to, when you step back and have a thoughtful moment around answering these questions, what's our purpose? Has it changed? They actually open up in that open-minded, open to the possibility way, can open up other connections and help you arrive at different solutions. Okay. So I would pause on this. If I were putting together structuring some thinking time, I would make this one session and just get super clear on what this is. Okay, there are a lot of ways you can serve your purpose, use your core competencies, and serve your core customers. The other ways to do it than you are now. The third thing, and I'm just going to touch on this for a sec, getting my eye on the clock here for a moment, is a reminder, not literally, but to invite all of your stakeholders into the room when you do an innovation session. I've used this with the Leadership Ben group to make sure that you are thinking from the perspective of your ecosystem and beyond, and do you know within your ecosystem, back to the point of observation as a discovery behavior, do you know what your folks do you know what all of these groups are thinking right now? Is there something in this where you can make sure that you have current points of view from your key stakeholders that will inform and bring more knowledge, more information to your innovative thinking? And importantly here, there is always someone else beyond who you think that is a key stakeholder. So always leave the who else question there. Okay. I'm going to pause again. We basically, just to recap, we've just talked about some mindset shifts that keep you open. We've talked about really pausing and getting super clear on a few fundamentals, which typically can be true and agreed upon, and from which then you can innovate. And we've made sure that you have current pulse checks on the people, the stakeholders on a 360 basis who you serve. Thoughts or questions about what else might get the grounding or the scene setting done for innovative thinking, or things you've done?
Cindy, I have a question.
Please.
So I'm wondering, so this is all like really great in kind of a working environment, but how do these things kind of transfer to making like a personal, innovative decision?
That's a super good question, Maddie. Let's actually go there now around some of the real life practices. Some things that you might actually do, because these are things you could do in any context with whatever questions are sort of are on your mind, be they personal, professional, at work, or out in another context. Okay?
Awesome.
Cool. Okay. So, actually, and it's funny you should ask that, Maddie, because this is sort of as I wrote this down, I said, oh my God, this would be so fun, and this would be so fun over drinks. This is just the notion of having like an opposable thinking session, creating, and this is as much to prime thinking differently / out of the box, but can you create odd couples, triplets, quadruplets, probably not more than that, to spark this associational thinking process that we spent some time on at the beginning. So, to ask, what if we combine this with that? What if we combine this and that meant that and that? And sometimes it really is as simple as pulling things out of left field. It can be, Maddie, to your question, if someone, I'll give you an example from someone I worked with recently who's like in career transition, who knew that she's actually an American woman working with a social enterprise in Uganda, and she's starting to burn out. This predates COVID. And she's thinking, oh, I feel such an obligation to be here, and I don't want to be the white privileged country head. I want to find a Ugandan and hopefully a Ugandan woman successor for myself. And my boss is going to be pissed if I tell her that I've run out of steam for this venture and think I need to go home and be near my family. So all of this was churning for her on a personal level. And she started to, she asked herself, what if I want to leave and I want to leave well, I'm going to need to find myself a successor. And this is the this or the that. I want to go, but I want to leave a good successor. So those things seem contradictory for her, and she was at great tension about it for at least a couple of our meetings. And then it struck her that by working through, even if it took longer than she thought, the plan to answer her questions and do what's right to support a Uganda successor, she would learn a lot that could be transferable to potentially a next job, or to helping other NGOs with, white leadership continue to make this transition from, having, a white sort of neo-colonialist, that she would call it, perspective, and getting more, doing the next phase of the work for autonomy for some of these organizations. I hope that's an example, because two things that look completely contradictory to her for a while till she worked through it, suddenly, by doing this well and leaving, which makes me feel guilty, I will develop an expertise that I think might actually be part of my mission, my next mission. Okay, so you could have just a ton of fun with this, and it sparks how people can think really, really, really far apart and create new connections. Here's one that goes back to the idea of, there's a thing called a T group. And this is a little bit in the idea of convening, like in idea networking. What would it be like to get together, you or some of your, you around your depth of knowledge in your field, and this could be work, or maybe it could be you. It could be just like, this could just be you or another person on where they are in their life. It could be around a personal situation. And what would it be like to invite others who have a diverse breadth of knowledge to join you in an innovative thinking session? Now, this could look and feel a little like some of you, I'm sure, have talked about having your own personal board of directors. How I would differentiate this from that is that it is what you are intentionally doing across the top of the T is ensuring that you're bringing people, inviting people who have very diverse and different perspectives and knowledge bases from you. So it's more of a stretch that way than just surrounding yourself with people who may already at this point be, in your bubble or already in your sphere of support. This is often what alliance building is about, right? This is about what convening is. It really is the word convening on purpose. I just want to pause here, and as anyone, if you type in, if you have, convened a session similar to this, and maybe just a thumb up or thumb down on if it ended up being a productive experience for generating new ideas. All right. If you give it a try and it's helpful, or I can help you scope it out a little bit further, let me know. So the T, you're looking at my slides, so I realize, but the T is one way to expand the content around the table. Another way is a zoom in, zoom out, where used in a very specific way, and very reinforcing of some of what we've talked about already. So to zoom deep dive into the details of your understanding, in this case of a business or a mission, but you're a deep understanding of what matters to you at this point in your life, and your values would be a personal example. But to dive into, we talked earlier about, do we know how our customers are doing? Is there a customer pulse check to be done right now? What information will we learn by doing that about how they're thinking about the future? So a zoom in is a deep dive into the details. As zooming out, obviously, is flying high, but doing it to be able to see where those details fit into the big picture. What the uniqueness of innovative thinking skill is around this third point, thinking laterally, which is what happens when you're zooming in and out at the same time. What can you see differently? This may feel a little esoteric, but often in the movement, between I'm down here with my head down looking at the details, I'm up on the balcony and I'm looking down and I see where they fit in, suddenly in the doing both and doing them rapidly. Around a table, over the course of a quick day, you see things newly in your peripheral vision that you can learn that can factor into this. So this is about, the concept here is the movement between in and out that may spark new associations for you. And the last thing I just want to touch on today is the obvious about making it a priority. Prioritizing time to think is always the hardest thing for many of us. It goes, time goes, and especially these days. You'll see on this page the Innovator's DNA, which is one, Clayton Christensen, who is recently passed away, actually, is a thought leader I respect greatly on innovative thinking and innovation. So I leave you with that resource, and it'll be in the slides when you get them. In research that he and his team have done, innovative entrepreneurs spend up to 50% of their time on discovery behaviors. They're observing, they're idea networking, they're actually fostering the collection of ideas that seem random until all of a sudden a novel connection is made and they've come up with something new. The other thing I think in general, and another resource I offer to you, is a book called Time to Think by Nancy Klein, who does talk, is an advocate for the notion that we spend no time thinking anymore, and we really should, like thinking in the way that if we are not clear on what we want to do, then the quality of what we do is impacted. So those are just 2 plugs for resources I hope you might enjoy, and the notion that this doesn't happen without prioritizing it. To tie it all together, I think the notion that you have some, that you have a busy day, but that this is an iterative process suggests, like my fantasy for some of you is that this turns into a 3 to 5% of time activity on some regular cadence for the next couple of months. And it could be around, a personal reflection, and sometimes you answer some of the getting started questions, and then bring in some other people with diversity of opinion and expertise, and have a big old brainstorm, and then process that, and then maybe do it again and do it again, and see if it doesn't iterate you forward into all of those question marks and the big white space we currently have out there in the world. The last thing I wanted to offer is super tactical. These have been so helpful to me, and I'm getting feedback that they are to others as well. In any conversation, but especially in the context of getting folks together for an innovation session, the notion of how do I re-rail? If something is really going off the tracks, how do I get it back on? And I think these 3 rules of thumb are really helpful. If you're in a group and people are at a point where it's, it's this or it's that, it's that or this or it's that, which is how many of us think, and we are very trained to be binary thinkers, set a ground rule that after 3 either ors, it's got to be this or it's that. Either after 3 times, you declare you're both wrong, so let's figure out what else it could be, how else it could be done. And that might open up again what seems like a gridlock or a bottleneck. Another trick of trade here, just around unlocking limiting assumptions, is to say, it can't be that way. The problem solver in us, who says, yeah, but the problem is it'll be blah, 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 blah. To use this construct, if things could be exactly the way you want, or if your problem wasn't a problem, then how would it be? Or if you could solve your problem, what would have to change? So I wanted to offer you that. And someone recently shared this with me, and I think it's super wise. Behind blame is always a request. So if you can spend some time in honest conversation, getting to deeper understanding about what is the request behind the blame. It's a way of uncovering and opening up possibility. So I am going to take myself off screen here. There is, my contact information is here. If you guys, anyone wants to follow up, I'd be delighted. I know this is a webinar on thinking is heavy. Any thoughts or questions? I don't know if I'm back out of my screen share. I'm there. There we go. Man, what else can, if there are any things here that have been coming through on the chat panel, Maddie. Any other thoughts or questions, gang? All right.
Let's see here. Well, I think that's it. And with 3 minutes to spare, well done. Timeline. You're correct. I'm over here kind of just mulling it all over still. I think digesting that next step after something like that, which is a good step. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. If anyone wants to, again, I'm so happy just to hop on the phone with anyone and sort of take it to another step of application, you know, for you personally or for your teams. It's there's a lot of concept and practice, but it's not hugs. It's a little harder.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Just a quick reminder to everyone, the Chamber will send out an email. Yes, Natalie, the Chamber will send out an email with the slide deck, which had your contact information at the end of it as well. So the slides will go out to everyone as well as a link to enter to win that drawing. So keep an eye out for an email. If you don't see it, let us know. And we will wrap this up. Thanks so much, Cindy. Thanks everyone for coming on. And we'll stay in touch.
Okay, bye everyone.